Hello there, you're tuned in to Hear Me Roar. We're a student-run and produced show broadcasting live from inside the studio of Breckenridge Hall here on the campus of Morehead State University. I'm your host, Jordan Simonson, and I'm very happy to have you here with us this Wednesday evening. Our show this month, we're talking about abuse, self, physical, emotional, and sexual. Our guests this evening will share stories and information about these issues while also offering solutions. All of that and much more on this month's episode of Hear Me Roar. We'll be back right after this. Don't miss a minute.
I will not spin plates to make everyone happy.
I will not duck to avoid hitting the glass ceiling.
I will not stay in a small box where I cannot control my life.
I will not just stand on the sidelines and cheer the team on.
I will not carry ancestral baggage, fearful that if I lay down, there will be no purpose in my life.
I will not do something well that doesn't make me happy.
I will not speak so softly that my voice is not heard.
I will not sit at home while others experience the world.
I will not wear masks to avoid being seen fully or upsetting others.
I will not convince myself that tomorrow will suffice when it comes to following my bliss.
I will not play follow the leader unless I am the leader.
Follow your bliss.
The process to getting better was just as much, well, more so mentally and emotionally as it was physically. Through all of that, I learned how to see things in a different perspective, and I learned how to, love myself for who I was and how I was made, and I learned how to cope with stress or anxiety in a healthy way instead of a way that was like self-destructive, I guess. So I believe that through all of that, I learned so many important skills that I can carry with me for the remainder of my life. And even though it was such a hard year or, such a hard journey, I'm so thankful that I learned what I did and I'm able to reach out and inspire other people to do the same.
Welcome back to Hear Me Roar. This evening we're talking with Haley Dyer. Welcome to the show, Haley.
Thank you so much.
We're glad to have you back.
Thanks.
So you went through an eating disorder.
Yes.
Can you kind of talk about how you realized you had that problem?
Yeah, it's something that I suspected definitely through behaviors and eating habits that I had, started in college, just over exercising, being way too anxious about what I was eating. Things like that kind of pieced together.
So do you think anxiousness was one of the major blames for the?
Absolutely. There's no question about it.
When was the moment you realized you needed to change or you needed to seek help for the?
That moment kind of came and went. There would be times that I knew I wanted to seek help, but I was too afraid or I wasn't quite ready to take that step. And it wasn't until I was hospitalized that I knew, at that moment I could do what I needed to do to take the steps to get better.
What were some of those steps to recovery?
Really just, first of all, getting my physical health back into a really good condition, and that requires medical professionals. That's not something that you can do on your own once you're at such a low weight, but other than that, just working every day to change your perspective and look at things in a new light.
How did you go about with, eating better, or what? How did the doctors help?
Yeah, the doctors played such a key role. I mean, they kind of explained to me the truth behind the food I was eating, because for such a long time I believed that food was the enemy, and I don't know if that makes any sense, but I knew that it was bad for me to be so anxious about what I was eating, and they really helped me to see that it wasn't the enemy at all.
Very cool. We'll be right back after this commercial break with our continued talk with Haley Dyer. We'll be back right after this. Don't miss a minute.
This is Charlie. Charlie wakes up and gets ready for class like most students. But Charlie doesn't have breakfast. Charlie feels unfulfilled. This is Nick. Nick gets up and gets ready as well, but Nick makes breakfast and feels great. Don't skip the most important meal of the day. Eat breakfast.
Welcome back to Hear Me Roar. I'm your host, Jordan Simonson, and we're talking with Haley Dyer. We're discussing the eating disorder you had.
Yes.
About how long ago was that?
I was actually hospitalized in August of 2014, so it's been almost 2 years now.
Let's talk about your support system and how they helped you, or if they helped you through all of it.
Yes, a support system is a major key for being successful in recovery. I had a lot of support in the center I was at, and I had a lot of support with family and friends and just, typical people who loved me.
Now, after these 2 years have passed, how are you feeling?
The major quote that I say all the time is that my worst days in recovery are still better than my best days with the eating disorder. And you kind of have to let that sink in, but life is so much better, and that's mainly why I want to speak out and to empower other people who might be struggling with this, because you don't believe that things are really that much better. So I'm here recovered to tell them, yes, they are. You deserve the life that you always wanted, and the mental capacity to get there.
Someone who might be struggling through a similar issue, what's the best steps for them to take to get to recovery?
First of all, honesty and openness. You have to be willing to be honest with yourself and be honest with the doctors that you have, or just people that you trust. For me, that was a friend. I had a friend come up to me and explain that she was worried about me, and I had thoughts to myself, like maybe I have an eating disorder, or maybe this is more than I can handle, but it wasn't until she approached me that I decided to just be honest about it. You have to be vulnerable, to take that step.
Now, maybe a friend of someone who might be going through an eating disorder, how could they get courage to confront their friend? And
I am so glad that you asked me that. That's something that's so important. No one wants to kind of cross that line because they feel like, that's bad or uncomfortable. But as a friend, speaking out about it kind of takes the power away from the eating disorder. So, just do it out of love and compassion. And yeah, it might be uncomfortable, but it's what's best for your friend at that time. And I would just encourage them to be honest and just talk to them about it.
Very cool. Well, Haley, thank you again so much for being on our show this month, and I'm very happy you're healthier now.
Thank you.
There's much more in this episode of Hear Me Roar. We'll be back after this commercial break. Welcome back to Hear Me Roar. I'm Jordan, and Sean's with us. We're missing a Gabby, though.
We are.
I'm very happy you're able to come out today.
Oh, thank you.
This month, we're discussing abuse, and we're going to talk about relationship abuse.
We are.
So, what are signs of emotionally abusive relationships?
Well, you have more elusive signs and you have more overt signs. So some elusive signs include kind of intimidation and isolation and also manipulation. More overt signs would be threatening, bullying, verbal criticism, verbal abuse basically, and honestly, constant criticism. That is the goal. And both have the objective basically to control and subjugate the other person.
Now, if you feel like you're maybe in one of these types of relationships, how do you go about getting out or confronting it? Or
well, usually that is a personal judgment on the person in the relationship. So it's important to have to practice really self-compassion, to recognize the warning signs first of all, and then admit really that you're in an abusive relationship. And then the next further steps are basically seeking help and getting social support from other people, really.
Now, mentioning social support, if we turn the tables and you think you witness an emotionally abusive relationship, how could you step in or kind of voice your concern to these people?
Well, it's actually a very, very touchy subject, so it's hard to really intervene. But the best thing you can do is help the person kind of recognize and identify those warning signs. And you could also present and aid them into seeking professional help and offering resources for them as well.
Do you know of any campus services that might be offered here to help?
Well, campus services, usually with the counseling center, they offer a lot of opportunities to be able to go and speak with someone related to abusive relationships or anything of that sort.
And now, do you know if emotionally abuse can turn into physical or sexual abuse, or is?
It tends to. It can actually. So it's important to understand that the abusive person, their characteristics, it usually comes from a sense of shame, fear, and they want to kind of persuade the other person and control that other person. So usually it can tend, lead into physical abuse, but emotional abuse is very detrimental on its own as well.
Well, we're going to take a commercial break, but we have more of your questions coming up next here on Hear Me Roar. Welcome back to Hear Me Roar. My name is Jordan, and we're with Sean today talking about emotionally abusive relationships. We've been talking about the victim in a relationship. What about the abuser? What are the signs that you might be the abuser in a relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some signs that kind of connote that you could be abuser include if you feel like the partner angers you easily, they push your buttons, if you belittle them in front of other people, if you demean them, you criticize them for not being the perfect partner or a good person, you basically lash out at them for no reason, you're quick to react to small things, and also if you're overly jealous and you have to keep very close tabs on the person. So those are little signs that could show that maybe you could be a bit emotionally abusive.
What are some steps that you could take to become better?
Well, steps, first, they have to come from the person themselves. They have to want the change. You can't persuade them. You can't try to guilt them into changing on their own, because it's important to know that a lot of the characteristics of an abusive person correlate very closely with personality disorders like narcissism personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. So those personality deficiencies are a bit harder to change without professional help. So going to seek professional help, professional counsel would be the best option for them.
And once again, Morehead State University does offer a counseling service on campus. So you realize you're in an abusive relationship. Is there any hope in saving it? Should you even try? Is it best just to get out?
Well, it really depends on the person. because they can opt to leave the relationship if they feel that there's not much value in them staying. So it's for the individual to really assess the costs and benefits in staying in the relationship. If they feel that there's no escape, that they're alone, that they're completely isolated, and that there's no one to help them, it would be best to kind of reach out to other people or, as a friend, support them emotionally and let them know that they're not alone in this world.
Very cool. Well, Sean, thank you again so much for coming on the show. Sean and our missing Gabby are both psychology majors on Morehead State University's campus, and they answer your questions, which you can find on our Facebook page. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
There's much more coming up right after this.
MSU is learning.
School spirit.
Teamwork.
MSU is Greek. MSU is diverse.
Historical.
Beautiful.
MSU is educational.
Fitness.
It's hands-on.
MSU is the sound.
MSU is art.
MSU is potential.
MSU is much more.
What am I gonna do? I've got a test tomorrow, an article to read, paper due.
Welcome back to Hear Me Roar. I'm Jordan, and we're here with Ashley Spencer. Thanks for being on the show, Ashley.
Thank you for having me.
So now you're a part of MSU's Counseling and Health Services.
Right.
What do you do there?
I am a substance abuse therapist as well as a mental health therapist in the health clinic here on campus.
All right. Our theme this month is abuse, and we're going to talk about sexual abuse. So what's the definition of consent?
Consent is any voluntary agreement between two people to participate in the act of something. So it is not assumed because the absence of no is present. It can be withdrawn at any time, and it is not by threat or force.
Now, when alcohol's involved, obviously it's still yes means yes, no means no, but that becomes a problem when alcohol's involved. How?
I think that, it's assumed that it does become a problem because, different settings and everything, but, just because alcohol is involved it's actually illegal to, it can be illegal to
canoodle.
Right. So really, I think that sometimes people assume because alcohol is present that they have given consent when that's necessarily not the case, because people can still feel violated with the absence of no or like that. I don't know.
Why is this a problem on college campuses, the consent, the sexual assault?
I think oftentimes it can be assumed. I think that it might be assumed that because the person seemed to be willing or seemed to be able to participate that, that does not necessarily, yes doesn't necessarily mean yes, especially if you're unconscious or not able to
say no.
Right.
Well, we're going to continue this interview after this commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Hear Me Roar. I'm your host, Jordan, and we're talking to Ashley Spencer, who is a therapist for the Health and Services on Morehead State University. So we're discussing sexual abuse, and if you were to be sexually assaulted, how would you go about reporting it?
If your friend is sexually assaulted, you could go to the Morehead State Police and report it there, or also the local police off campus if you're off campus.
What services does the campus offer about this? I know we have SART, but what is it?
So SART stands for Sexual Assault Response Team, and it is a service we provide on campus. It has a SANE nurse examiner, a person from law enforcement, and an advocate. So with that, people are able to not have to leave campus if they do want to report a sexual assault. Just because they have this exam done doesn't mean that it's going to be reported. It just provides support. However, the point of the team is to gather and collect evidence. So that is done over a period of time by someone who is, of course, trained to do so, and we do have that available here on campus.
I'm sure it's all confidential, and your identity's not.
Yes, everything's confidential, and if no one wants to make a report, they don't have to.
Okay. If, let's say, you're a friend of someone and you think they may have been assaulted, what's the best steps to kind of bringing it to light or getting them to seek help?
Well, of course, that person would want to, but getting them to a safe place. As far as, immediately you want to get them to a safe place, make sure that everything is, that they don't brush their teeth or smoke or eat or drink, because that washes away some of the evidence, and to be able to keep the clothing that they had, and that way they can bring that with them to the health clinic if they do decide to go ahead and have an SANE exam done.
Could you change beforehand and bring in the clothing, or is it best to wear?
Right.
Okay.
You can change and bring it.
Now, let's say this unfortunate thing happens to someone. What are the steps to recovery and becoming back to normal?
Well, if this was to happen to somebody, of course, the best thing to do would be to start talking about it, and that's where we have counseling is available on campus to any student who is a student at MSU. And then there's also resources in the community. I know Pathways has a victims treatment therapist and an advocate as well. So there's support there. There's also Doves of Gateway, and St. Clair Hospital also has the SANE nurse there as well.
There's all these different opportunities for help. Is it a bigger problem than what we're thinking? Because I personally don't hear a lot of accounts of it, but.
Well, I think that, it happens, but it's something that is underreported. So, it's not something that maybe a lot of people talk about. Of course, it's a very private issue, and if it was to happen to somebody, they're not necessarily maybe coming forward with it, or they choose to do so more privately because of the issue that it is, but it happens. So it happens on campus, it happens off campus, so yes.
Would you care to tell our viewers how to get in contact with the health and counseling services of Morehead?
Yes, so if you or someone that you know needs to make an appointment with a counselor, you can walk into the health clinic. It's at the second floor of Allie Young, or you can call at 606-783-2055. And for the health side, you can, I think, make appointments online, but for the counseling, you can't. That's because in case someone is maybe in crisis or dealing with a traumatic event, that we want to be able to screen those face-to-face.
Wonderful. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for being on our show this month. Congratulations on your bundle of joy coming soon.
Thank you.
You're tuned in to Hear Me Roar. Don't go anywhere. We have much more coming up after this commercial break.
Party! Yeah! Hold up, what are you guys doing?
Thanks, friendly firemen.
Always be prepared.
More fire safety tips, go to nfa.org.
MSU is learning.
School spirit.
Teamwork.
MSU is Greek. MSU is diverse.
Historical.
Beautiful.
MSU is educational.
Fitness.
It's hands-on.
MSU is the sound.
MSU is art.
Quiet.
MSU is potential.
MSU is much more.
Welcome back to Hear Me Roar. I'm your host, Jordan Simonson, and thank you for tuning in on this month's show. We've been talking about abuse, physical, self, and sexual abuse. And now we're going to turn to physical abusive relationships. It's actually a pretty big problem in America. More than 3 million men are victims of it, and 1 in 4 women will likely be a victim in an abusive relationship in their lifetime. So it's very important that everyone knows how to defend themselves. And one of those defenses is offered here on MSU's campus in the form of the Aikido Club. Professor of Health Johnny Newsom directs the club every Monday and Wednesday at 5 in the southwest corner of Laughlin Hall on the University of Morehead State's campus. So he's unable to be with us this evening because he's instructing the class, but our producers were able to chat with him earlier in the week and share his story with you all. This is the video.
Well, first of all, you can't let yourself be hurt because you can't protect them, you can't protect anyone. So the first thing you have to do is learn to protect yourself. And that means you have to be self-reliant. Basically, you can't depend on somebody else to be responsible for your safety. We have to each look out for our own. Actually, when my kids were of an age where I thought, oh, they need to learn some kind of way to defend themselves, I started asking around, and people told me about Aikido, which I had never heard of, and it's not an aggressive thing. We don't compete or anything in Aikido, and it was just sold to me as a much more spiritual, magnanimous kind of way to do things. So I thought, well, I'll introduce them to that, and of course I went with them for about 3 months and then asked them if they wanted to keep going, and they said no. But I never quit because I really liked it. Most arts think we should fight back. Some people say, oh, Aikido is nonviolent. It isn't nonviolent. We transcend violence. We go to the place where violence is, but we don't need to join it. And, to protect ourselves, and also because it's just a whole lot of fun. When we really enjoy the training, it's fun. Because I just think it's really a good way to become a good person. And it teaches ethics, and it teaches caring about other people, and you want to know that you can protect yourself so nobody will beat you up. Then at some point you want to know if you can beat other people up. But after a few years, that's kind of ridiculous. You can't study that for very long and still grow. So then you finally learn, how can I protect everybody, even if somebody's really, really trying hard to hurt me, and how do I not get angry, and how do I just accept that attack without myself becoming violent. That's why I love it. So that's why I've been doing it for over 35 years. You don't get tired of that.
And that just about does it for this month's show of Hear Me Roar. I've been your host, Jordan Simonson, and I've been very happy you've tuned into us this Wednesday evening. I would like to thank our guests, Haley Dyer, Ashley Spencer, and Sean, for coming back on our show this month, to talk about abuse. We talked about physical, emotional, sexual, and self. Hopefully, if any one of you is suffering or knows someone who is, you'll reach out and get the help and support you need and deserve. We also watched a video about the Aikido Club. Once again, they meet every Monday and Wednesday at 5 in the Laughlin Hall on Morehead State's campus. It's $25 a semester to enter, but you're welcome to watch. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. Just search Hear Me Roar in the search bar. And we'll see you next month here on Hear Me Roar. Thank you again for tuning in, and I hope to see you in April.